Hallo, herzlich willkommen im Depot. Good evening, welcome to Depot, welcome to the live stream. My name is Sarah van Dordrecht, I'm the director, and I welcome the audience and the podium to the first Depot event of the season. We started last week with the Wienwoche cooperation, and I already saw some of you there. Welcome back. And I'm very happy that we talk about mothering, art, and communities tonight. The project Mothering Communities was invented by the curator Barbara Mahlknecht, who also teaches and is a theorist. And it took place in the 2nd district during the summer. And when she approached me for the first time and told me about the project, I said, okay, Depot wants to join, because the idea of sitting in open air and talk and in the grass was very appealing. And it was a really nice talk we had on the 15th of July. And tonight we will continue, and there is also a new participant, Daniela Koweindl, who worked with the topic of mothering and art for a long time. So Barbara will introduce the panelists. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm very excited to continue the discussion. The event will be recorded, so we are not so many people, but it would be great if you have any questions later, if you spoke into the microphone, so everybody can hear. If you don't want to, it's also fine. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, it's working. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much to the Depot. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I know it's been a very intense month for many of you, probably, with many events in arts, culture, and activism happening. My name is Barbara Mahlknecht. I'm a curator, researcher, and art educator, and I am honored to be the moderator of tonight's discussion and conversation. I briefly want to introduce the panelists to you. As Sarah already told you, the panel in this constellation more or less has, this is so to say the 2nd episode of an ongoing series probably. And next to me there is Guadalupe Aldrete. She's a Mexican-born artist living in Vienna. She works with many different media like performance, photography, video installations, and she very much uses somatic, autoethnographic, and multisensory methods to explore the materiality of the body, memory, and emotion. You have been presenting internationally and locally, and I think you have been doing a very intriguing and in-depth work on mothering, memory, the body, and transformation. You might probably be telling us a little bit more afterwards. And Guadalupe is here, I think, in multiple functions as an artist, performer, mother, caregiver, and as an artist who participated in mothering communities, but also as an artist who participated in the MOTHERBOARD, so another project. There are multiple connections. But also as a curator, actually. She, together with Vaida Tamosevichute, I hope I pronounce it more or less correctly, curated a project at the Valley Export Kubus last year called As Mom Overload Uncensorable, which you will briefly present to us afterwards. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Then next to Guadalupe, there is Anežka Jabůrková. She's a Vienna-based art historian and curator, specialized in contemporary art and critical art practice. And she very much deals with critical, political perspectives also of migrant feminism that is kind of unsettling the Eurocentric, white Eurocentric, hegemonial feminist perspective, so to say, which I think is very crucial here. And together with Amalia Stojsavljevic, together they have curated a very intriguing project at the Wienwoche. That is the background for the invitation, but I think there's much more to it. The project was entitled Doing the Dirty Work. I don't know if any one of you has seen the project, and I think that the crucial point of the project was to broaden the perspective of maternal caregiving through reproductive labor more general, especially from a Southern European and migrant perspective. So thank you very much for coming. And then we have Stefanie Winter. You are here also in many multiple functions and also as a representative, so to say, of the Motherboard. So Stefanie Winter is an artist and director. She's also a founder of SALON Hybrid, which is a performative office for experimental affairs. And as an artist, she's playing with different inner and outer landscapes, empty spaces and spaces of color. Together with Nora Meyer, who is unfortunately not with us tonight, but she co-founded the Motherboard.
Sorry. The Motherboard is my project. It's an art space.
Thank you so much. It's Stefanie Winter's project.
We did it together.
Okay. Thank you so much for You never. It's never enough to be precise. So it's good that you are here. Together you conceptualized the project Radical Care within the framework of the Motherboard, and you will probably then also tell us a little bit more about it. And last but not least, I'm very delighted to have Daniela Koweindl with us, who I call tonight's expert in the topic. She's a member and spokesperson for art policy of the IG Bildende Kunst, and she's active also on the board of Kulturrat Österreich. The focus of her work is social rights and equal rights for all, and especially you were part of the initiative Art and Child, which sounds a bit strange in English, so Kunst und Kind. Daniela is also wearing this amazing bottom, what is the English name for it again? Button, yeah, button. We all want to have one, so I hope you have brought one. Oh no! Yeah, and you might know the initiative. I think it was a very complex and interesting initiative, and Daniela will tell us more about it. Yeah, so just maybe as a very brief, not even introduction, but key word. I think tonight's conversation is an open conversation on both, let's say, mothering, maternal care, reproductive labor, both as a topic or issue within art and curating, but also very much looking at the structural side of what it means in terms of resources, infrastructures, challenges, and conflict zones, so to say. So as a first question, I would ask all of you, why do you think and how do you think mothering or maternal caregiving, why do you think or how have you engaged with these thematics? Why do you think it is important? Guadalupe, maybe you want to start.
Hello. Yes. I have to say, when I discovered that I was pregnant, I was thinking like, I will never do artworks about motherhood. I was like, no way. But then I realized as a human, not just as an artist, that there is like this twist that society do towards an individual with uterus that is pregnant. And that was not fun at all. And then I decided, like, I was pressing myself, like controlling, I would say self-censoring, until I realized, look, my work is about life and about my life, and this is happening to me, so I kind of cannot ignore it. And it was like, that's how it started for me as an artist, to just talk about all these problematic situations that I was confronted already as a pregnant person, and later as migrant giving birth in a horrible hospital in Vienna, and yes, and then later being at home with a small baby. You know, all these things were like forced me to all the time think and process and be active. I never been a person that stays and wait. I will need to stand up and do something.
Thank you very much for sharing this very personal yet very political insight. Anežka?
So I would like to start that I think there is a very positive development on the topic, that there is a diversity of approaches as one sees on the panel, and it's important to show motherhood or caregiving responsibilities in a non-monolithic way, and that it's not anymore romanticized or presented as a virtue, but you see really different experiences, and this is also thanks to the representation of parents or people with caregiving responsibilities in different institutions. So that's positive for me, and for me as a curator, I started with the interest in work, and it was always connected to the caregiving labor. I started already 3-4 years ago, and in the meantime I found out that I'm pregnant, so that also influenced my work as a curator, the interest that I wanted to present in the exhibitions, which also manifested in the Doing the Dirty exhibition that we did in the framework of Wienwoche. So maybe we'll talk about it later, and I will give you.
Stephanie, maybe you want to share your point of starting point with us.
First of all, hello. Kind of before I had my kids, I was like reading a lot and thinking a lot, and maybe not so much producing. But when I came pregnant, I kind of really started doing my work. I came very productive, and since I have my kids, I have two. The older is 11. I really fall really into my work and being mother in the same time. And I don't know why, but I never had the idea to think about motherhood from a theoretical or a perspective of art until COVID started. So, and yeah, I think this kind of strange situation, what happened to us all, but especially to the mothers and to caretakers, changed my own necessity to, it kind of come much closer into my artwork. And so I started with Nora Meyer, like a little bit more than 2.5 years ago, to think about motherhood. And on the beginning it was much more like the idea to think on a mothership, on a journey, thinking about motherhood, traveling through space, because I'm very much into science fiction. But kind of we found out that the mothership is way too heavy to navigate and to get all this different information. So we needed a much more wider platform to also as a picture, as a name. And so we kind of came up with the topic, or like the headline, Radical Care. And it also changing the title helped us really to dive much deeper in the aspects of care. And so kind of we created a navigation, a cloud, and one what was very much in the direction of motherhood, but another direction also went very much also coming from my artwork in a kind of more eco-care perspective, and thinking motherhood also as a political strategy in a wider aspect. Yeah, and my currently like a womb is presented in Budapest in a show, and so kind of after this kind of start thinking more about motherhood, it really melted very much into my work. And yeah, I mean, there's much more to say, but I think I hand out the microphone to you, no?
Thank you. Thank you. And you, Daniela, probably have also, you will be telling us about how Kind und Kunst started then.
Yeah. Good evening to everybody, first of all. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this interesting panel. I hope so. How did the project start? How did we start discussing troubles, obstacles for parenting artists? As very often, the initiative was taken by board members of IG Bildende Kunst. IG Bildende Kunst is an artist association led by artists. And some of the board members lately had become parents and had to confront new struggles. And so we started with workshops mainly in the beginning to invite the experts, parenting artists, to share their experience, to share their knowledge, and to find out what are the obstacles. And usually as IG Bildende Kunst is working like an artist union, that's the way we are acting. We always focus on working conditions. So especially we wanted to know how are the working conditions for parenting artists? Where do they have to struggle even more than artists in general have to struggle to make a living, to proceed doing their artwork? And maybe it's very important to say we never focused on mothership. We always focused on parenting artists, obviously from a feminist perspective. So as everybody knows, just to underline, obviously having children or not, female artists have to struggle more in the art world as everywhere in the world, and having children doesn't make it even easier. So that's maybe the conditions where we started from. Yeah.
Was there also a personal, let's say, impulse from your side to engage in this project? Because it's not that everybody from IG Bildende participated in the same way. So was there
No, but it's my labor job, I have to say. I'm working there as spokesperson for cultural policies quite a long time, for more than 20 years right now. And for me, it was a rather new topic. Of course, I confronted struggles like that because I'm giving advisory concerning social insurance topics and so on. But we never decided to focus on that. We had anti-racist focuses, we had working groups concerning pay the artist now, something like that. Or on mobility and social rights, obviously about taxes, but never on Kunst und Kind. And so it was rather challenging to find out and to structure what are the conditions, what are bad experiences, what are good experiences, what are the desires and the demands of parenting artists. And in the long run, within the first 5 years, we had about 11 workshops, we had exhibitions, we had a lot of texts, we had an open call to provide posters that we produced afterwards and we exhibited them. Yeah, and there had been a lot of initiatives, and we always focused on the experiences of the experts coming to our workshops. So we always invited 2 artists to start a dialogue. It was more kind of situation of an interview. We had a moderator and 2 artists being invited. And then every artist who came could participate. Obviously, they could come with their children. All the events took place in the morning. It was always a time of 3.5 hours to have enough time to make breaks whenever the children or the parents needed to have a break. So 3.5 hours is rather much time, but we've always wanted to have enough time for informal exchange in the breaks and afterwards as well. So maybe the dialogue and the discussion was maybe 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, as it usually is. But one thing we learned from all this is just tiny improvements make it easier for parents to participate, to be in time. Let's say when we start at 10, then we really start at 10, and when we say the workshop goes from 10 to 1 o'clock, then we really finish at 1 o'clock. if some participants want to continue talking, they could stay there, but the official event was closed down because that was mentioned rather often, that parenting artists are excluded, or parents are excluded by all these informal talks, by having overtime at some meetings and appointments, and important decisions are taken after that.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I'm making a jump into it because there's now already so much on the table. I think it's super important what you said, and I'm just grasping this keyword time and timing, time limits, and exclusion via time limits, and also, let's say, the hegemonic societal idea of how work and time are organized. This is already, I think, a major topic. I really liked hearing from you that I think there's a variety of concerns, but maybe also shared concerns, or from the experience of becoming a mother or becoming pregnant, and having really in the real world feeling the obstacles and the differences that brings or initiated a kind of process of awareness. And I'd really love also for the public for you to briefly share the projects that you were working on, also to give you some visuals on the backgrounds. And from there then we will, I think, go into the discussion that Daniela opened up in a way. So I'd like to ask the technician if we can have the beamer on, please. Guadalupe, you said that you, I found that super interesting, and there's the whole history of, there is a long history of exclusion of artist mothers from the art field. And there's also from Tracy Amin this famous quote saying that there are great artists, these artists are called men, not mothers.
It's like they're great artists having children too, but they're called men.
Thank
it's
you.
About this having.
Sorry, it's the more precise version. I'm having such a great panel that helps me to say things correctly. So, but I really liked also that you said, okay, then seeing and feeling what that means for you as a pregnant person that is also coming from not coming from another context, but that is a migrant and that is not a German mother tongue and so forth, in having then the experience in the hospital. Would you share with us briefly your project that you co-curated in the Kubis Valley Export, and maybe how that also is linked to that experience?
I know the picture very well.
I'll share the pictures.
Okay, well, it's actually just not to take too much time. This is a project, the S-Mom project started in 2019, and it was actually exactly from that point of, as a mother with a small kid or with a kid at all, you cannot go to any residencies or all those things. You are like, you are completely either officially or practically excluded. So S-Mom started as a residency where you could go with your kid and you will be able to work whenever without being forced to have any results. But because we live in this capitalist world where you always have to show something, we end up having a small festival showing like work in progress. And the older our kids became, all these developed into no residency at all, but a big festival. And originally also because of our history from Vaida and from mine was, it started from all this giving space to mother artists, but it evolved more and more into individuals that have something to say about motherhood, also saying, I don't want to be a mother, like all these topics that are censored in a way. And we have like a lot of different positions. I think that's one characteristic of S-Mom. I don't know if we are in a way you can say it's a very, perhaps in a way a bit negative project from the vibe, but at the same time we want to open up this window for artists to talk openly about the topic and not always happily or positively, yeah, or just, how to say, like, it's a window for artists to talk about what they are always forbidden to talk about, like all sorts of things that are related to motherhood. And that's why we have artists that are not mothers, or even that they are not, that have no uterus or whatever. It's just if they really have something urgent to say about the mother, the matter of the mother.
The project was, I think, hugely interesting, and not solely that the perspective was intersectional, non-binary, trans-inclusive, and so forth, but also the topics that are heavily, there's a heavy taboo on talking about birth and violence, or birth and sex, or motherhood, like all this, not the glamorous facade, 50s look-alike topics. Maybe you want to just give an example.
I think that's a very good example. It's true. Perhaps you can go back to the picture before, because that's actually a wonderful example. We have Rocío Bolívar, is one of the most known Mexican artists from the 80s and 90s, and her work is really, really like body art, very, very strong. And she's very well known for her very crazy body art works. And she has a son. And she's a really very strong personality as an artist. And when she became older and her son got married and had a kid, then the wife asked him to stop the relation to her mother because she didn't want any of this bad influence on the kid. So it was the first time for her, in a way, that being a mother was so painful, because she realized her personality as an artist really was confronted into this macho society represented through her son, or through this woman that was forbidding their relation. So this artwork is based on that, and it's really, really hardcore to watch. It's really pure body art, like really harming herself, and she has a guy biting her, because for her she was like saying, like, this is for me the materialization of this pain I had of my son quitting the relation. This photo that you are seeing is in Kaunas. Even in Kaunas we have to create a special room to say this work is really hardcore.
So it's important to say that there are more sites.
Kaunas
Yes, in Lithuania and in
Kaunas is in Kaunas. Vaida lives in Kaunas in Lithuania, and we do shows in every place where we are. But of course, this artwork is impossible to show, or was impossible to show in the Viennese public space. So we try everything, all the possibilities to censor this artwork in a creative way, but it was just impossible. So we end up choosing a complete different artwork that had nothing to do with this one. But because it would have been completely disrespectful, and it was disrespectful for both, for the audience and for the artist. So together with the artist, we took the decision to just show something else. And the thing is, in the Valley Export Cube, if you know it, it's a room, but it's out of glass, so it counts as a public space, and everybody can see it when they walk by. And we decide to make a censoring that makes clear that something is being censored and that you are not able to see it because you don't want to see it, instead of just censoring the genitals, because that's just too easy. Yeah, but in the case of Rocío, it was just impossible, so we just decided.
But I think there is a super important point for our discussion, which is related to taboo censorship. So what are we able to show and talk about, and what is publicly felt as non-acceptable? I think that's super important and super interesting when it comes to the topic of the body, the maternal body, and yeah, the topics of violence, sex, giving birth, all that you topics that you showed or talked about in the. These are some pictures from the project still. Yeah, then we maybe ask Anežka to briefly talk about doing the dirty work. I think that is also hugely interesting in focusing the focus maybe from another perspective. I'm just going through the images and you.
Yeah, so doing the dirty work we did, as I already said, in the framework of Wien Woche. The collaboration was interesting because I was invited by the director, Jelena Micic, as well as was the Amalia Stojaslevic, and we didn't know each other before, so that was the interesting part of the cooperation. And when we met up and were talking about why Jelena Micic wants to put us together, we were thinking about what we have in common. And one of the things is that we have a migrant background. I'm from Czech Republic and she is from Southeastern Europe. And that's why we were then researching artists living in Vienna, dealing with the topic of care work and motherhood as well, and also, migrant background and this topic. But we looked under marginalized positions. And the important part of the project for us was somehow to get it close to the Viennese public, and that's why it was extremely important for us the choice of the space where the exhibition took place. And it was at the Semmelweis Clinic, one of the largest birthing clinics in Vienna that then closed down. And it was in the part of the clinic where, as you see now, the cooking pots, where all the staff and all the patients were cared for through the making of the meals. So at the beginning, because we also thought many other visitors maybe don't know the space, so we chose as the first art piece by Claudia Lomosic, which introduced the space. She was working about Semmelweis Clinic. And then as one proceeded through the space, you got different viewpoints on different problematics as a class, as a race, as a not EU passport, as not being part of the infrastructure, or having psychical problems or postpartum depression, then connecting work and motherhood, especially art, in the art field, and also the decision to be a mother. And also we had a few artworks about sex work and also about COVID and working during the COVID pandemic, because care work and motherhood were shed more light on during that times, which sadly somehow I think merged in the air again. So that is quickly about the exhibition, so I don't take too much time. If anybody has any questions, then later on then I can answer them.
Thank you. I think it's intriguing because when preparing today this moderation, I was thinking in every project gives a hint of what are the ingredients, I think, of bringing together the most crucial parts of why maternal care matters. I think because it's also not just because it's about Kinderbetreuung and the resources, or the so-called, what we in German call Unvereinbarkeit, the wouldn't know the English word for that, the compatibility maybe of paid labor, unpaid labor, and doing art, which is often unpaid too and sometimes paid. But I think all these aspects of taboo, censorship, also, yes, issues of violence, issues, and I think also specifically the perspective, not just the perspective, but the infrastructure, which is in the pandemic, the socialist necessary work. No? Then I was asking myself, how are these connected? How is the cleaning of the museum connected to the artist who can't show her work or their work because they have caring responsibilities and they have to reject the invitation or don't even get the invitation? And how is this then connected to the I don't know, museum having childcare, which very rarely museums have, but who is then going to do that work? No, I think that there are many interesting relations we could discuss about together. I now want to invite Stephanie to briefly introduce the Radical Care Project at the Motherboard. And I think, is it a film, Stephanie? The one? Yes. Is there sound as well?
Yes.
Sorry, because I didn't remember that. I was asked before if there's sound, and I said no, and I was. Oh, it's.
But I can start already to talk about it. And
no, I have. It's interesting, Emma, because here I have images. So I think it's fine. I don't see the video here. I think it's the images that we prepared for the discussion. So maybe we can just use these.
Okay. Okay.
It's fine. We don't need sound. Yeah.
Maybe I start with the Motherboard. The Motherboard is on one side, I think it as an exhibition place, but it's also more like a place to create things together and to learn from each other. And I'm kind of navigating this space in the 2nd district about also 2 years. And it's important that I maybe have some restrictions and I just show female perspectives and only group shows, so thinking always as a community about things. And also it's very much about the audience, so it's not about maybe doing so much an exhibition where you can find things like artwork. It's we try to think the space very much as a place of really engaging with the topics, with the objects within the space. And I also thought a lot about this relation with the audience and what is like this change that we kind of, the concept of white cube and the black box is like kind of, it's still there and it's very interesting, but I'm very much interested in this creating a space of togetherness and also dealing with the situation that how the people who enter are really part of the work, part of the process, and how the traces of communication, the traces of experience can kind of also change a space. So the idea within the exhibition is that there's never kind of a finished single moment, which is like the final show. It's like really opening a process within the space with all the shows we have done. And within this concept, we did the Radical Care Project also with creating a laboratory. And on one side, it was like a space, and we had some, like a research place and books, and we showed some videos, and Claudia Lumoschitz showed her video about lactation and her open perspective and about work. So on one side we showed these different videos, and on the other side the very important moment of being together in the space and really about the discussions and meeting and sharing ideas. And so we had this artist mother nights, and so we invited a lot of artists who are also mothers, and share their work and their experience and how being a mother influenced their work. And on the other side, we invited different people to share, like dealing with infrastructures, reflecting on infrastructures, and also Daniela Koweindl was with us, and Guadalupe. And yeah, it was a rich process. And then we were hit again by COVID, so we went from being in the space together to being online together. But still, I had the feeling it was like really rich pool of information. We kind of grew together. And the other aspect, I mean, there are so many different aspects, like you already said, but we had the feeling that on one side is like thinking on motherhood, thinking of being an artist and doing residencies and all this crazy situations like outside of being a mother nobody cares about or thinks about. We had the feeling very much and still have the feeling that a lot of residencies, for example, are very much designed for singles or for male singles. So there are some residencies I really would love to do, but they're too long, and I cannot bring my family. I can have like a visit for just 2 weeks, and I feel like this is already very much a restriction of leaving people behind. And I think also Guadalupe is like doing really great things about residencies, and I think like different things to make an international career, or also to communicate on different levels, is like really much still in process to change. I think there's still a lot of things to do, and I mean, that's just one detail. But on another aspect of our project, like I said before, was like this thinking also about the concept of motherhood in a much brighter way, and thinking about our current situation, also what could bring motherhood as a political concept, like this concept of caring, what could that also be an inspirational thing? Because we had the feeling in our radical care aspect, on one side it's really important to figure out this points where you really want to make an impact, where you set your critique, but on the other side there is really a lot of inspiration, and it is also I mean, on one side it was problematic during the pandemic that so much women had to take care of the kids and were in this double situation, but on the other side, I mean, it's also, they did it, they didn't run away. I mean, a lot of people just stand there and hold the hands and what did it, and I'm thinking, what can we do with our current situation? Who is running away? Who is just going on with not caring what we should change in our system, in our kind of entanglement with the whole ecosystem, with the bioreactor Earth. And I think thinking motherhood as aspect of love and also as a political approach is something what kind of, is very important to me. And I just brought out this book, The Psyche of the Earth is a Glowing Pudding, and it is a kind of glossary about the encounter with the terrestrial consciousness. And so it's like from this very personal being a mother to the political thinking about motherhood to the Mother Earth problems, or to Mother Earth. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie, for this and mentioning and elaborating a little bit on the scales of mothering, which I think is intriguing and very important. And I think it's in both of your projects as well. The scales of a personal experience, which is, we could say the personal is always political, which is the very old saying, but I think it's very true. And it's also always material and structural, so it's never just a so-called private personal experience. I think that is super important to recenter also reproductive labor, maternal caregiving, not as just the personal or private decision of a choice, because it's much more. And I think the earth and caring for the climate, or caring for the climate, and also how to, from what I heard from you, how to hold on to and going through these multiple crises could also be inspired by maternal caregiving practices, for instance. Daniela, I think that what I really like that you already said things that Kunst and Kind claimed, so to say. I have a list here that I found on your website with all the things that Kind und Kunst claimed, among them art and child scholarships, residencies, studio spaces and fellowships explicitly for artists with children, residencies with adequate housing situation for accompanying children, no age restrictions in calls for proposals, offer and promotion of childcare at art and cultural events, for artists in residence programs and residences abroad, funding for accompanying children to cover additional travel costs and childcare, clear presentation of the studio and housing situation in residences. It's very much about prices, residences. And then another one is free admission for exhibitions for everyone under 18. And I think there is much more. Daniela, do you want to maybe tell us a bit more about this list? So what are the things that through you did these very intriguing interviews that you're still working on, that I think are going to be published maybe even, or are more of a research? You did the poster project. Please go to the website of the IG Bildende Kunst. We could also do that. Yeah, maybe I do that when you're speaking, because there are amazing images of the exhibition you did with the call, and you see the posters, and it was kind of a campagne, what we call campagne in German, no? A campaign, yeah. Promoting to, and also as a call to politics, of course, to implement these requests for artists with children. Do you want to say a little bit more? How did this list, or how do you worked on this list? What of these? Because this list is actually from 2017, so it's 5 years. No, it's almost 6 years. I mean, when I read this, I thought, oh wow, amazing. What happened in the meantime? How is the situation now?
Yeah. No, when you were reading that list, I thought, how cool would it be if you were reading a list of goals we already reached? Mm-hmm. It's not that way, you obviously would know. In the long run, I would say every demand on this list is still a demand. Obviously, step by step, things are changing. Artists, parenting artists, encouraging themselves. There's a lot of self-empowerment happening. But a really cool reaction we had by the Department for Visual Arts at the, what's it called, Kunst section on the federal level. It was Olga Okonev who really was very open to our discussion, was very interested. We once had a workshop inviting her. She explained every kind of Kunstförderung, funding policy of her department, and she described step by step every single studio abroad where you could get a fellowship. So all the parenting artists, having been at the workshop, had the possibility to ask as many questions as they would have liked to ask. And after that, they started to describe all the studios much more precisely, to provide as much as information as they could to make it on their website, to make it easier for parenting artists to decide whether this or that studio would fit for going there with children, without children, but having them to visit he or her while being abroad. And that was really great because we were talking a lot about family-friendly fellowships and studio spaces. And there's one of these big international platforms providing a long list of fellowships and studios. And you have some filters. You could put a criteria like which ones are family-friendly. And a lot of artists said, I don't want to have somebody else to decide about that because it's so different having a baby, having a 4-year-old child, having a 10-year-old child. So what would it mean to have a family-friendly room, just to have there a second bed, a third, a fourth bed for the family? That's not the point. That's not the single point, let's say. So it's much better to provide as much information, and whether you want to travel with children or not, that shouldn't be so much a topic in the sense that you have to make your proposal by mentioning whether you have a child or not, or having children or not. That should be the artist's decision. That's a big issue, a feminist issue as well, how female artists are dealing with talking about having children, how to mention them in the CV, to do it or do not. These questions really don't, male artists don't have to think so much about this question. That was an experience we really, really had very often. Going back to the fellowships by the
but Daniela, did this really happen? Because I don't, the last time I don't see like, from what I know, there is only one residence in Paris that has a apartment that is, where, or two maybe residences.
It's not child. It's just in a normal apartment.
Okay, but there is no, there is, you can bring the children. Yeah. I think also because, I mean, from what the request on your list is, I would think that they would have to provide an apartment that is family friendly, whatever that means, but having more room. Then also, I mean, you are in the list also asking for more funding.
Yeah.
And not just, I mean, you invited Olga Okunev to tell about more, but I think it's, sorry to say that, but it's a bit ridiculous that you have to invite a person to tell you what a studio is like. I mean, there should be very clear.
No, that's what it was. We had this discussion and there had been a lot of proposals, and after that there was a really good improvement because there was much more information concerning the apartments there. I didn't check it lately, how it is right now. But Angie described, and there had been maybe 2 studios where she said to that place she really would not recommend to bring your family because, for example, there was this studio in Rome which 3 artists had to share anyhow. They had the common kitchen and common bathroom and so on, and there had been enough troubles by that. And she really would not recommend to go there with children because it wouldn't make it easier for all the artists living there too. That was her comment. She did not say it's not allowed, it's not forbidden, but she would not recommend that.
But it's also not supported.
Yeah, but the apartment in Rome doesn't exist anymore. Because of all the troubles. So, and what happened not much time afterwards is that on the federal level there is an extra fellowship or an extra amount to this fellowship you can ask for if you're a single parent. That happened some months afterwards, and it was really cool because that were first successes we had when talking about this. It's not that we had already started a big campaign and doing rumors to talk about these demands. It was just talking about it, and that was a nice first step. What really nice successes had been, I think, was this kind of self-empowerment when we had these workshops, and a lot of artists joined the workshops regularly, and some of them told me that they felt encouraged now to apply for residencies. They wouldn't have done it before because they thought, okay, having a baby, having a little child, it's not possible, have to wait maybe when they're older, maybe after school, maybe when they're 20 or whatever. So they felt encouraged after having talked to colleagues, and often we invited artists who already had children at the age of maybe 12, 15, 20, 25 years. So parenting artists with a lot of experience. Okay, maybe 20 years ago, and time changed and the circumstances changed, but younger artists felt encouraged to apply. And I really liked that, because it was just by talking informally at some break they told me, I applied there just now. Now I got a fellowship to go there. And that's a big success, I think, because it was not a goal we had on the list, but it happened. And even years later, when I met somebody from the artists I got to know there, they mentioned, I'm still in contact with this artist, I got friends to that artist, and they got to know at these workshops. And it was just by chance, because they had to struggle the same issues, and those are the small steps we made, yeah. Obviously,
there's still a lot to do then.
There's still a lot to do, and not only concerning Kunst und Kind, that's with every topic we are dealing with. Yeah.
Guadalupe, do you want to say, to maybe add something about being a mother in residence? Because that's how your project in Lithuania started. I think, I think it's a bit issue.
Yeah, well, actually, we were seeing it, Vaida and I, more like in more international, not, well, she doesn't even live here. So she invited me actually to make a residency with her. At that time, I was just an artist for her. And it was very, very, very nice to come with my kid. And it was really not the perfect residency. It was perhaps a little bit dirty, perhaps not everything perfect, but it was just so embracing and full of love. And it just really helped me to work. And the structure is, if you can work 10 minutes a day, just work 10 minutes a day. You don't need to have like schedule. You don't have to. And yeah, we've been trying different structures, because then the next year we had another artist also, and we had a much cleaner, much perfect place, but it was very stressful because everything had to stay all the time perfect. So it was like, okay, we take care of the kids, then we clean everything and leave everything perfect, and then we just have half of a minute to work. So it was like, it's still a working process to find the right balance, but we are working on it. And also, I think a big problem, it's in general, in Vienna and in other places, that they need to see a result. So really all of our the budget is going to 90% on having this result, having this festival, showing off. And it's just a very little bit at the end that we can invest into having a residency. So it's also this thing, like to finance a residency is really hard. I don't know how to do it here in Vienna. Until now, I just got very little money, even for the festival, so I didn't even came to the step of asking for money for the residency. And I just wanted to mention I had a residency 2021 at the Frauenmuseum in Hittisau, and that was so nice. Really, they organized a small apartment for me and my family, and it was a Bauernhof, so my kid could play downstairs. And they helped me to find a nanny, and it was just a dream. I was just, that was like real, okay, we take a mother artist and we give her the opportunity to work.
Was that childcare?
Yes, it was childcare. It was nice.
That's also then to organize childcare that works. I think it's also a tricky thing, especially when a kid is small. It's not just in the first day staying with another person that she or he doesn't know.
Well, I have to say the parents of my partner also came and helped us. So it was a whole army for me being able to work. But the museum also helped us to get all of this happening. So that was awesome. But except from that, no idea about other residencies that I can take my kid with me.
Anežka, what do you think is missing? What are I mean, I think there's so many things that are problematic, and I think starting from your exhibition, what I feel is very important is the interconnection between maternal care and other types of care. I mean, also sex work or other care struggles. So I think it's maybe also of connecting these struggles, but maybe there's also other connections or just issues that you think are super crucial when talking about maternal care in the fields of arts and in so what do you perceive is the situation currently like, for example, in Vienna, and what has to change? Where are the main conflicts?
So childcare is a big issue, especially as you already mentioned, having a small baby and having a grown-up, basically. That it's nice that evening events have childcare, but if you bring there like 1-year-old or 2-year-old, you can't leave them with a person that they never saw and go and network. Also, what I think it's the biggest trouble is actually having a being financially sufficient, self-sufficient, having when you are a parent and have a kid and you have to take care of him. It's really difficult, and from my experience, because when you wrote us the email about this panel, you were talking also we should like look on our personal experience. So I have EU passport. I worked for many years in Vienna, so I was thinking I'm already part of the system. But then when I had a baby, it took 6 months to process the maternal income. So I was lucky that I had a partner that I could financially depend on. But I think it's very problematic that before you actually have a baby, you are told that you should buy this bed and, breathe when you are giving birth. But that somebody tells you and also gives you wrong information, which happens a lot, because a lot of Beratungsstellen or helping people that want to help or are there to give you information usually come from a place that they are talking to a person that has is more integrated, even more integrated in the system. So also it happens that you get a bad legal advice, and you lose money and you lose access to an income, to money, and then you are forced, on top of being a caregiver, for illegal on illegal means of getting money, which was then the topic of the sex work for example, in the exhibition. And actually, one of the artworks dealt that it was easier to do a sex work, a chat, than being an illegal and English teacher, because then you were exploited as well. You never got the money on time. You never could think in advance. So that was also the topics in the exhibition. So this still, I don't think there's a place where you can survive out of maternal income if you are not prepared well in advance. If you don't have like 40 hours working job before for a few years, then you can manage in Austria. But if you don't know that and don't have these informations, and you are especially not in the infrastructure or integrated, then it's.
So there's also a huge obstacle, not just obstacle, but discrimination and inequality of access to certain resources, services, not enough advice and information, and especially also racist infrastructure or infrastructure that has a racist subtext that obviously hinders people becoming pregnant when they don't have an Austrian or European passport. That makes it much more difficult for them.
Sorry, I need to say something or I explode. There is this Donauspital that's in the 2nd district they have the highest rate on foreigner mothers giving birth, and many of them have to receive social help from non-governmental organizations like Caritas or I forgot the name, but you know, these religious organizations. And I got help from them because nobody else will help me. And then I was, non-governmental, anything will give me a penny, so I end up with them. And then I was told that they know by fact that there is like, from these from all these ladies that go to this hospital, at least 90% of them suffer violence during the birth. And there is no record of that, there is not anything. And that's a very systematic violence act against migrant mothers. So, just by the way.
I think this is a huge topic and a very crucial and that would need its own really space and activism. Is there anything happening that you know that there is any, I don't know, actions around it or somebody building awareness? And you said there is no documentation, so already that is the problem.
I think except from the arts or, I don't know exactly. But I mean, there are so many topics, so that's why, so it's just too much.
No, but I think it's crucial because for me, I'm just thinking through the panel how these are interconnected topics. So not just, how to organize childcare, what does it mean if you want to go to an exhibition opening but there's no childcare? What about the timing also of events? You said you organize things in the morning because in the evening or you can't go out, or rarely it's more difficult to go out, especially if you are a single parent and all of these things, yeah. It's a class matter also, yeah. Maybe in wrapping up, let's say, the voices from the panel and then inviting the public to not just ask questions, but also share your thoughts and experiences. I would still invite Stephanie and Daniela to, if there's anything, I mean, there's a lot we have not discussed and not said, obviously, but from your perspective, Stephanie, and also Daniela, maybe you could also give us what is one of the central issues, problems, conflict zones right now when thinking about maternal care work, making art, owning a living? Just by an example, for example. I know there's a lot.
I mean, a wish. I wish. I think there are so many lobbies, like the oil lobby or whatever. We need really a maternal, a lobby for the motherhood in politics, and I think you're doing already a very good. I mean, lobby is like the wrong word, but like giving this strong light on this topic. Like tonight is also a very important moment, and I think since I started to really dive into these topics, I discovered so much more are just rising up, and a lot of different initiatives are starting. I just met currently this community from Berlin. Also in the museum, they showed their film, and I feel like the important thing is that we don't feel that you're doing this and I'm doing that project. It's like really to engage from these different maybe bubbles to build like a bigger cloud and a bigger power, and I think this is also part of togetherness and also getting more pressure on the politics, getting more pressure on the funding, on the also this personal feedback or connect with each other about a kind of a residency feedback, because I think if that it's very important on one side to sit together on the table to make a workshop and to really talk to certain persons, but it's also about this singular feedback of people, not just like this being outside and yeah, it's like going with the information. Yeah.
And maybe, yes, I totally agree, and I was seeing that both of you, all of you were. I think that there is a big yes from all of us. I think that there is not just politics, but also institutions and a societal awareness that is missing, actually. We all know that when we are speaking to friends who might not have children or decided not to have children, which is completely legitimate, of course, but there is little awareness of the meaning of raising a child, and also childhood and children are, how to say, I would say that in a way they are also excluded, like thinking about childhood and children, they are included in a certain, you know, the museums have the Geburtstagsparty, birthday parties, or they have, I don't know, of course the Kunstvermittlung, art education for children, but actually childcare, or having different opening hours, or having spaces where, or artwork that kids could touch, or engaging in topics that are really, really delicate, like the topics that you address in your exhibition. I think that is something else, and I think there's so much more that needs to happen. Sorry that I jumped in, Daniela. I'll give you the last. You are the last.
Thank you for adding that.
You're wrapping up.
Okay, I absolutely can underline what Stephanie just said right now, but when I'm looking back to all those years of discussion and exchanges, I think there had been two issues that really had been a topic all the time, besides all the goals, or not, yes, goals and demands you mentioned on the list. It's always about gender troubles, which is not a problem, especially in the art world. It's a problem in the society, but in the art world too, it's not better in that field. And the other one is how to make a living as an artist. And I just would like, for a moment, to quote Christine Hohenbüchler. She once was at the workshop, and when in the final round we were asking her, what would be your biggest demand, your biggest wish to have better working conditions as a parenting artist? And then she said, what would be the measure to make life easier as parents and artists? No doubt, artists' fees. At every exhibition, everybody gets paid except the artists. And that's a very big point to talk about another campaign by IG Wiener Kunst. It's called Pay the Artist Now. And it's really so bad that it's always the same discussion. Because as we were talking about childcare in the evening, it's about traveling with your children. Everything costs much more, and it's already so hard to make a living as an artist, even as a male artist, even harder for female artists, and even harder and harder and harder for parenting artists. So as long as artists are getting paid so badly, or even are not paid for all the work, it's really difficult to change lives, to encourage artists to have a free choice to have of having children and not having children. And it's obvious, according to several research studies, that artists are having less children than non-artists are having. I'm talking about female artists, it's not the same with male artists. And so we are coming back to gender troubles, how the circumstances in the long run are influencing your decision of being an artist, of being a parent. Because what happens if you don't make enough money from your artwork? You have to have time to live your life with your child or with your children, and you have to look for a labor job to afford having a family, in the long run, it will always or really often be the artwork you will quit. Because, as some artists said, sometimes it seems to become some luxury hobby to be an artist, and it's such a hard fight and such a daily struggle for artists to stay on being an artist and not to come back to that maybe 20 years afterwards.
I tend to say something, but I don't. Thank you very much. Yeah, I will add something in the discussion. So thanks to you, I think that we just hit the, how would we say that in English? Ja, den Zipfel des Eisberges haben wir angefasst, the top of the iceberg. So I'm really happy if you share your thoughts and questions and comments with us. Also the panel, of course, everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experiences. I would like to come back to the beginning and ask Barbara a question. Because mothering communities, this project is very different to anything I knew in Vienna. So could you give us brief insight if your experience were fulfilled, what would you make different, what worked, what didn't work, and how did it work out with your own mothering? So it would be great to have this inside perspective when we have you here.
I'm keeping it brief, but thank you, Sarah, for the question. Mothering Communities was a project that was different from the other projects in that it happened in the public space, or let's say semi-public space. It's been funded by Shift-Basis Kultur Wien. We collaborated with the Zentrum Fokus Forschung, and basically it consisted in a public program, workshops. So I invited artists to contribute in very different ways. I wanted to have both artworks, but what I wanted much more is formats of engagement and building some sort of community there. So artist Isabella Kohlhuber, she conceived a big sculpture that was called the Childcare Pavilion, which was an open wooden structure in a big, I also have a photograph. And then there were workshops for children, caregivers or maternal caregivers, what in German I called Fürsorgende, so to also include people who are not identifying as mothers, but still, I was still very much, I still hold on to the importance of keeping the term mothers also into it. And I think that it was different than, I think specifically because it was in a public space or semi-public space. We had a great location where children were very freely, could move very freely, which was great. I think that was really crucial. We had infrastructure because the Zentrum Fokus Forschung has a building there, and there is a kitchen and a loo and all these kinds of. We had, I'm showing you just a very few pictures so that you have an idea of it. This is the group of artists, mothers that were part of the project. And in the background you see the childcare pavilion. I don't say so much, these are different workshops. This was a workshop on birthing positions with an Italian collective, Grossi Moglioni, which was super interesting. And these are Francesca and Vera. Again, the childcare pavilion, which was a space of exploration for children. Children were going in and out, and it's based on Isabella Kohlhuber's work on language and typography. This was at the opening. So what really, I think, worked out very well is that the space itself, so the location and also the program was able to embrace different people, from elderly people to younger people to babies, so because they were totally free to move and to be there. And then for me it was very important to open the space up for different projects. This was a workshop by Lena Rosa Händle with math monsters for children, but very often the adults engaged even more than the children in the workshops. They liked it a lot. This is Isabella Kohlhuber's pavilion. Claudia Sandoval Romero, who gave 2 workshops basically entitled Recovering Life, inspired by Silvia Federici's work and the indigenous practices of women in Latin America. And it was very much about plants, abortion, female health, caregiving, and was also, everything was very shared. So there were little objects. This was also Claudia Sandoval Romero. And not last but not least, we had a wonderful, super inspiring performance by Guadalupe. I unfortunately have no photo there with a soundscape. That was, I think, also a highlight of the whole project. I think what I learned from it is how difficult it is to build up a community, and also the question what means to build a community. So I think that there is building a community is also caring for a community, and I think the project was also an experiment of how to do that together. I think my wish would be that that could be even more together, because in the end, of course, I was the artistic director and curator, which was completely fine and great and interesting. At the same time, I think, like, thinking in terms of ecofeminism, of maternal labor, I think that the perspective should be how can we share that together. So that in terms of structuring a project would mean that you would have to work more as a collective, probably. For me, because you asked, maybe that's the last thing I say, it was also interesting, it was a semi-public space, which was, I think, ambivalent. So on the one hand, not everybody knew the place. It was not, there is not a fence, but a wall, so to say, which was great in terms of safety for children and for the pavilion. But of course, it's also an issue of accessibility. Only the people there were a few people from the Gemeindebau that saw it from the window, that came or that complained about the sound. But there were also people from the street coming, so it was not totally exclusive, but you still had to know where to go, that it happens, etc., etc. Yeah. Maybe I leave it there. Just want to not to take up too much space.
Yeah, I want also to thank you for this discussion today, and also for the project of Barbara in SAM, because it's another access and another step, like Stephanie said, putting the light on females, female artists, motherhood, and all those complications who are going with it in our days. And there's something going on, and there must go on something. And I'm also mother of 2 children, and also I have a granddaughter, and so I'm always confronted with these themes of being mother and artist. And it was really not easy to have small children, and it's not easy to have big children too, adult children, and it's always the same theme, how to manage the life structure, money and so on, and doing art, and being a woman. It's
and earning a living.
Yeah. It's really the big theme, and I'm so lucky that I met you here and talking about it and hearing of the experiences, because they are so difficile. but also the same. And it's very interesting, and I thank you for this invitation.
Thank you, Karin.
So, was this on? I don't know. Yes.
So maybe we can continue at the bar. Thank you so much for coming today, and I hope there will be a community which is already built up, and it will grow, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the panel.